you would have a little more control. Still, the deployment and certain aspects of testing like non-functional testing, non-functional requirements testing, and all of those would still be separate, right? So you would have iterative development of your software, and you'll have one deploy that's once in 3 months, once in 6 months, if you're lucky, once in a week and a half, or an iteration or a couple of iterations, right? So it has changed to that, and here is what I call a mini waterfall model. You analyze, build, and test again in the same fashion, but smaller time frames. And if you were lucky enough, you would work in an XP fashion, wherein there are better testing practices, and people would try to get testing much closer to development, or much in an integrated fashion, and the developers and testers could collaborate on writing the unit tests, functional tests, and your test cycles would be more effective. But still, the deployments, if you see the deployments, they would again be after an iteration or after a couple of iterations. So if you see any product life cycle in general, we have an ideate and prototype phase, we have a build phase, and we have a deploy and validate, right? So the ideate and prototype phase is when the companies are really thinking about either a new feature or a new product, and at this point they are not sure whether this particular product will work or not, whether this particular idea will work or not. They validate using some market data, and then they throw it, once that is validated, they throw it for the development teams to build it. And then after deployment, the phase is really getting consumer feedback and making changes based on that, right? So all the testing practices, most of the testing focus has been on the build phase here, right? When we make sure that the products are built in the right fashion, all the testing practices are in place and things like that. But we haven't been able to really concentrate on ideate and prototype and deployment, post-deployment activities, right? And that's where we have a lot of potential on how testing can have a bigger impact in these two phases. So what I would like to focus here is on this particular box here. So once you have deployed, right, and consider a scenario, and some of the companies are doing this already, wherein they deploy on a daily basis or an hourly basis. How do you collect consumer feedback, and how do you incorporate that into your software development lifecycle? How do you shrink your lead times? How do you reduce your lead time right from a requirement gathering to getting that particular requirement in development, and how, as testing community, can we support that particular lifecycle, right? So that's one thing that we need to focus on. The other is the circle here. Test even before analyze. So this is feasibility studies, and how can testing really help, either in terms of analyzing data or understanding how a particular product is going to work in a particular geography. So even before an enterprise starts spending any money in the build phase, how do you validate whether your product is going to really work or not? So these are two things that we haven't focused on really a lot, and that's up for grabs, and that's the potential. So if you see, the testing footprint has grown quite a bit in the last decade, right? And this will continue to happen. So talking about business as usual, right? We all understand that these three things, and there'll be more, I could think of these three, are business as usual. We don't think of these things as niche skills anymore, right? So testing early in the software development lifecycle, this is a mainstream thing now. Testers to understand code and also be able to write code. So gone are the days when manual testers are separate and automation testers are separate. Now we all need to understand that quality is a shared responsibility, and everyone needs to understand that we are doing the right thing to get the right quality product. Right? And automated testing. So if you want continuous delivery, if you want to test your changes faster, automated testing is another thing that is mainstream or business as usual. But also, if you see, these business as usuals have also become passive. If you see, I would like to add these new business as usuals, right? Agile software development lifecycle, again, is very mainstream, right? Again, I'm talking for the majority here. Maybe there's still some projects out there who's still trying to move to Agile. But if you see any of the new product development, that is mainstream Agile. more or less, right? Continuous integration, yeah. So talk about speed, talk about change, talk about testing every single change that the development team has made. You need continuous integration. Again, nothing that that is cutting edge. This is something that you need on a day-to-day basis. Continuous delivery. You want to reduce your lead time. You want to give your customers what they want at a very less time. Continuous delivery is something that is needed, and a lot of companies out there are doing it. And cross-platform support. So it's been a while since we have, I don't know how many number of devices out there, how many different types of devices, operating systems, screens, screen sizes, etc., multiple dimensions. So again, cross-platform support is something that is a demand, and it's a usual demand. It's nothing out of the box anymore, right? So if those were business as usual, what are we looking forward to? I'll take 2 more minutes. What are we looking forward to really? Shrinking lead time. So we talk about shrinking lead times. So there have been some work around reducing the lead time, but how do you shrink it further and further? 3 aspects really: the speed. How do you enable your development teams to make changes faster and faster and faster? How do you test your changes faster? And the second aspect is, how do you make sure that whatever you're testing is effective, right? So we need a little more focus on this too. And the second point here, validating ideas faster, might not necessarily be in an automated fashion, but you really need to think about whatever you're testing, especially when you're launching a new product, whether that is effective and whether that's really going to achieve the goals, the business goals or not. And continuous delivery. So when your product is being designed in a fashion so that it can be enabled for continuous delivery, for example, microservices, goes tandem with continuous delivery. You build in a microservices architecture fashion so that you can deploy independent chunks of code to production whenever you want. How is your testing strategy going to change really there to cater to that kind of needs, right? And the second is DevOps. So again, gone are the days when you say that I'm just going to build and test and the operations team is going to take care of it. If you want to reduce your lead time, if you want to shrink it, if you want to go to production faster, you need to integrate these 2 things. You need to make sure that these 2 things work in hand in hand. And what is the testing role here? So these are some things that we need to really look forward to. Testing in production, again, you have new ideas and you want to validate. You open it up for a small set of users. What is important here is the circle. So once you get feedback, real-time feedback, how do you really go about analyzing, building, and deploying it in a faster fashion, in a more frequent fashion to the production and open it up for more users? So how does testing enable this particular thing here? Also, if you think about the non-functional requirements testing, initial days there would be separate performance testing teams, separate security testing teams. I think those are still needed, but what we also need to think about, how can we integrate testing of these non-functional requirements? How do we get this into the software development lifecycle itself? How can we test these things in a continuous fashion with more Internet of Things, with more people going social, and every time you buy something, you have to share it on Facebook or Twitter, right? With so much of data points, or so much of failure points, you really need to make sure that the privacy is maintained and there's no loopholes in the security of this end-to-end systems. How do you make sure that the performance, at least some bare minimum performance, is tested on a continuous basis and is not left for the performance testing team to be taken care of? And of course, usability and compatibility. Like you talk about multiple devices and multiple appliances to be connected or integrated. How do you make sure that that happens? And the last thing I really want to touch upon is the Internet of Things. And yeah, so this is a comment. I'll probably share this presentation. You can take a look. I'm really running out of time. And some things that you need to take care of when testing this. So some things on the top are self-explanatory. Usability, yes. Connectivity, how do these different applications integrate with each other? How do they work seamlessly? How do you take care of security and privacy? But the last thing here is the effectiveness. So whatever you're building, whatever devices you're integrating, whatever end-to-end systems you're building, one thing is to test whether they're working fine or not. The other thing is to see whether this entire thing is really effective or not, whether that makes sense for the end user or not. And that's where we have lost focus in the past. That's where we can lose focus. So that's one thing to watch out for. Just to summarize, so this is be the first to tell. So testing phase is no more in the later part, or no more just in during the development, but also how do we become more business relevant, and how do we really tell the business whether whatever we are building is the right thing or not. Scale with this, again, talking about reducing the lead time and improving or increasing your scale on your presence. Revisit your purpose. So we have had a set of guidelines, or we have followed certain practices as a testing community. It's time we revisit that and see what does the market need right now, and how do we change our goals accordingly? How do we support the bigger cause? How do we support the business causes and the end consumers? And innovate less. There's a lot of scope for innovation in the new things, so we need to innovate more. And that's what the theme for this edition of vodQA is. Let's push the envelope. Thanks a lot. If you have any questions, you can catch me or Namitha offline. We are here throughout the day. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Namitha and KK. So we have a small token of gratitude for you.